Hi again, and welcome to It's Not Rocket Science, 5 questions over coffee. That's far too many words to say after you've had too much coffee. So let's just get straight into it. I'm here today with Rob Jolles. Rob is going to give us some great tips, I know, today. Rob's got a fantastic website. I've been on, had a look at some of the stuff he talks about how authentic you need to be. So, Rob, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to 5 questions over coffee. Looking forward to the conversation very much indeed.
Well, I'm ready for the challenge, Stuart. Hit me.
Let's see what we can do to challenge you then. So just tell us in a few sentences what your ideal client problem, challenge they have that you try and sort of help them to solve.
Yeah, I in a sense, and I have 2 clients, and I think we all have 2 clients. We have our client and then the client that client serves. So my clients, when I thought about thinking about your question, first client is I'm a sales trainer. I typically teach sales to your classic sales groups, financial industry, things like that. But I wrote a book called How to Change Minds, which brought me into hostage negotiators, polygraph examiners, police departments, nurses, hospitals. That's my client. I teach persuasion. So, the biggest challenge they have is a lot of times it's budget. And it's real odd in my industry. When business is bad and they need a sales trainer, instinctively, they don't have the budget for it. When business is great and product is flying off the shelf, now they have the budget. They don't really need me as much. I'm happy to take their phone call. It's odd. It should be complete opposite. You bring in a sales trainer when you're struggling. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges is to kind of get them on the right side of that issue. But Stuart, that's one client. The other client that I believe I serve are the people that they're selling to. And as a former Xerox guy, we call that the end user, person who's using the box. And it's important that when I'm teaching salespeople is ethical. It's not manipulative. It focuses on the fact that people will struggle to make change, and you're going to have to ask more difficult questions, but getting into the whys and the hows. So those are kind of my 2 clients, if you will, that struggle.
Rob, I love the idea. I mean, we could talk for many hours about the fact that too many business owners, too many businesses, when their things are going well, fail to dig the well that they need when the rain stops. There are so many business out there that just forget the fact that things might change. And I love the analogy you put there about the time that they need a sales trainer is when they're in real trouble. But for me, I love hearing about sales trainers who talk about ethics, because sales is given such a dirty word nowadays. But in actual fact, it is all about ethics. It's about helping people at the end of the day.
Yeah. And you know something? It's not always pretty. People don't understand that. I mean, the easy thing to say is, and the tagline on one of my books is The Art of Influence Without Manipulation. So I'll draw a line and show them. But Stuart, really, sometimes sales, you get your hands dirty. In other words, I do have to ask questions that don't always make you feel great listening to them. That's my responsibility. So what I've tried to do in the second half of my career is not necessarily drill down on, how to do this. Believe me, I'll tell you how. But I think we in the sales training industry have a responsibility to teach people why we're doing this, so that they understand, so that I don't just lay a process on you, but let's look at why.
Great. Love it. And so that sort of takes me to the second question, Rob, which is, what are the common mistakes people make when they're trying to solve that problem without help?
Well, it's odd because you're talking to an author, right? And I'm very proud of my books, etc. But I hope no one's listening. But one of the issues is I think they're reading too many books. I really do. I think people think I've met sales managers who have proudly told me I have my team reading a different book each month. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So you're basically teaching them golf lessons and you're changing the golf pro every month. Let's assume all the golf pros are good for a moment. They're certified. They're all good. But what would your swing look like 12 months later with 12 different golf pros? So I think one of the biggest issues is, and it's like I say, it's tough for a guy who writes books to look my client in the face and say, if you have a process that's repeatable and predictable, and you're implementing that process, I don't think you want to read my book. Don't read my book. There are plenty of other clients out there, but they struggle with that. They want to listen to different tapes, so to listen to, watch different videos. And I would prefer that they stick with the pro they have. And we're not done, by the way. And demand from that pro, okay, I've taken your lessons. Now what? Help me implement. Help me work this strategically. I've got the process down. But get better at master what you're doing. Stop jumping off the ship.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson, isn't it? The fact is that going back to the golf swing, you can watch as many YouTube videos as you like, but until you actually get out on the course or into the driving range and practice and work out what's going wrong, you do not improve. And that's so often what's going wrong in so many people's sales and marketing business, is that they just don't try and repeat and have a repeatable system that actually they've worked through and fine-tuned.
Yeah,
and I know that because my background is as a research scientist, and I actually thought that because I was taught when I was a scientist to have a repeatable process in order to get to an end result, that when I went into the world of business, I had to throw that away because business people didn't have those. They were all flying off the cuff and they were trying to do things differently. It took me a long time to come back and realize actually what I learned about having repeatability was the key to having business success.
Yeah. And Stuart, sometimes it's not all your fault. I wrote a piece one time called Shoot the Sales Trainer. Remember, I'm a sales trainer, but it's mistakes I've made too. I think that we fall in love when we have a process, and thank goodness already I'm giving a gold star to those that motivation and inspiration is nice, but actually have a process. But when we teach it, a lot of times, conventionally we teach the process. It kind of feels like a straitjacket. And if it doesn't feel like a straitjacket enough for you, then we're going to role play it in a straitjacket. We want every piece hit, everything hit. We'll count you off if you miss a piece within the process. And I'm not saying that at some point we can't listen for all the steps in the process, but what happens? Why aren't we leaping off those role plays to case studies where we allow people to strategically pick through the process, which is really just a path to walk on, and let them learn how to strategically use the process, maybe even move to simulations, which is utopia to me, which are role plays that have multiple endings and repercussions. But normally we don't get that far. So we're talking about the biggest pushback. One of them is, while we're training people think we're putting them in a box. We're reinforcing that by having management sit there with a job aid and tick every mark that they're making. And I love when we can get to let people out there and let them work through case studies and answer questions like, looking at this case study, what don't you need that you learned today? And really give them the freedom to use that model. That's how we teach it and keep it taught.
We've got a comment that's come in from Alfred, and Alfred was on the podcast a little while ago. Alfred sort of said it's easy to start, but it's much harder to follow through and incorporate the learning in your actions. I think it's a really key point that so many times people start doing something, but they don't necessarily keep learning from what they've been doing, do they?
No, they don't. And again, some of that's because the company they're working for shifts the process every couple months or every year. Yeah. So the whispers are, don't worry about it. It'll be over soon. And so we lose them that way. I'll tell you one other thing that's, I think, unique that I've done, and I'm happy to share this thought with every sales trainer out there. I usually typically work with big companies, a lot of Fortune 500s. In my contracts, I rarely will sign a contract now that doesn't, within the contract, I don't want to say force, but encourage the customer to allow me to spend a half a day with management, teaching them implementation benchmarks, how to use job aids, Stuart, how to give feedback so they don't damage a person who's trying a new golf swing. And guess what? When you try a new golf swing, first you're going to lose a little distance and then you'll gain the distance. So we have to teach people how to compassionately deliver feedback that's balanced. When we don't do that, when we just blow into town, teach a new process, management frequently sitting back there on their iPhones or their smartphones, not really engaged, but observing the training, No, they go through it just like everybody else. They're taken aside and taught how to implement it, how to evaluate and give feedback. And now we can support the process. Now we can teach it and keep it taught.
Do you know something? If somebody teaches me a new golf swing, Rob, I'm not going to lose distance. I'm going to be losing balls. So I need somebody who's going to give very gentle feedback and probably a large bucket of balls as well. So let's get to the thing that's probably going through people's minds at the moment, which is what's that one valuable free action or free resource? And I've sort of got something queued up that will come on the bottom now that might help them with sort of going through when they're thinking about some of this stuff. And I'll put up about something here where you might be able to find some of that valuable free resources that Rob's talking about.
Well, there's a couple, and I have two in a thought. So two are a valuable resource that I try and offer is one, I have a podcast. You can find that on my website. Two, I actually write something called a blarticle. I trademarked that 12 years ago. I have no intentions of hogging the word. I just didn't want to build a brand and have somebody trademark it and take it from me. But I love the ideas of a blog. My problem with a blog was always they just, you had a tuna fish sandwich. How does that help me? What did I learn from you eating a tuna fish sandwich? So I like that personal nature of a blog. The trainer in me said, where's the whiffum? What's in it for me? Where's that piece? So I actually created, trademarked, and got a circle R on it of something called a blarticle. Been writing it for 12 years. I write one every 2 weeks in a very compulsive fashion. And it's my way of dripping out information slowly. And I will tell you a story of how I had a wonderful conversation with Stuart. But that story won't end without something that Stuart and Rob found together that will be of value to you. And that's that blog article. That's something I'm very proud of. So those are some things that I offer, in books and things like that. But I guess the only other thing is, and it's just a word of advice, and I slipped it out. I'm just going to repeat it. Don't just learn, master. So, and that's like the kind of unfun part. It's fun, that initial learning, but mastering it, that's the challenge. And that's where you hear a musician put in, 1,000 hours on a song and things like that. If a musician puts in 1,000 hours to play a song, why can't we put in half that much and master a process? So let's really, once it's taught and it's taught right, and you liked it, don't fall out of love with it because you're doing it a lot. For that audience, it's the first time they've ever seen it.
That's a brilliant point. Thank you, Rob. Tell me, is there a particular concept or book or talk, other than your own books, I guess, that has really been influential in your career that you'd like to sort of inspire other people with?
Well, I have 6 books, but let me highlight just 2 of them quickly. One of them, I wrote the Great American Sales book. Simon & Schuster published it. It's great, and people love it. But I always had this dream of talking to everyone, not just card-carrying salespeople, parents. I want to teach people how to take an idea and put it in somebody else's brain and make them feel like they thought of it. And I really thought, why are we just talking about salespeople on that? How could that not help a manager? Anybody? So for me, there's 2 books. One is How to Change Minds: The Art of Influence Without Manipulation, and you won't see dollar signs, and you won't see the banner, "I'll make you more money." And now it's a cat and a mouse. It's how we communicate and the ethics and the responsibility to help people who fear change those minds before it's too late. And then the other book, which I just completed, is really a departure for me. I've been in a space helping people who are challenged in career transition. And after 10 years of meeting and coaching and mentoring, I saw certain patterns. So I wrote a book called Why People Don't Believe You. And, and it deals more with, think about it as a trilogy. We teach people how to sell. We teach them why now to sell. But we've got to teach them the tune. A lot of times we say, okay, we'll write something down. Somebody will look at it and go, okay, on an elevator pitch or whatever it is. So I'll just say that and then people will believe me. And we don't spend enough time with, well, what about the pitch of your voice? What about the pace of your conversation? What about where you place your pauses? What about getting into character? What about all the other things that surround I don't like the word soft skills, if you don't mind. It demeans the process. Let's call them performance skills, but for you and me. What about all those pieces around those performance skills? So those are two books, and they're my most recent. I'm very proud of all my books. They're like my children, but those are kind of where the action is for me these days.
I think that's a really valuable point, actually, Rob, because I much earlier in my career went off because I thought that I needed to learn how to be a better speaker because it would help me when I was in front of people, but not only in sales situations, but also when I was motivating staff and such like. And I went off and I joined organizations that helped me to become a better public speaker. And I think you're right. I learned a lot from that about not only where to put your hands when you're talking to somebody, but how to pace and how to react. And I learned the very important lesson of not to use the word but when you're talking to them, because that becomes one of those confrontational things. I was taught very carefully that you have to use the word and is a building word, but is a conversation stopper. And those lessons stayed with me for a long time. They stayed with me till now. And so often those are not brought into conversations that people need to have around selling.
Right. You're right. You know what the operative word here is, in my opinion, and it really sums up a lot of things we're talking about right now. Authenticity. How
Mm-hmm.
do you become authentic? At the end of the day, even if I'm interviewing for a job, I may not get all the words right. I may fumble here and slow down there. Oh, I didn't even bring the document I wanted to bring. But if I'm authentic and you believe me, uh, all that begins to fade a little bit. It's strange when I ask people to tell me the characteristics of salespeople that they really admire. A lot of times they'll talk about, well, they get people to believe them, and there's trust, and they're honest, but when you ask them, well, what do you think they're doing that makes people feel that way? They actually struggle, and it's the oldest lesson in the book. They typically ask questions and they listen.
Yeah.
And when we ask questions and listen, and then use the information we're getting, so not just say, I really like this coffee mug that I brought, but rather say, Stuart, when you had said earlier we wanted to have an easy conversation, I brought a mug. I'm tying it to our conversation. It becomes more authentic. Now I'm not crowbarring information in. We're having a cup of coffee together, and I like
The
this.
idea.
Yes, yes. Cheers to you, sir.
That's
That's
the idea.
what we want, not just between you and me. We want that out there with our clients, with our families, with our friends. We do that, everything else will fall in line.
Terrific, Rob. I now give you the easy ball here. This is the underarm softball that I'm throwing at you. No sliders here. What's the question that I should have asked you that you would have preferred me to ask, and then tell us the answer.
Question. Let's see. How about this one? Because I'm asked this a lot. Can anybody sell? I am the
Good question.
sales trainer of the stars. Can anybody sell? And the answer is absolutely. And I'm not just saying that. I'm telling you that I could show you case studies. Well, I can give you one person right off the bat, someone you probably never heard of, name of Ben Feldman. I think the greatest salesperson who ever lived. Rarely do I bump into anybody who outside of the insurance industry who's ever heard of him. And that's interesting to me because he wrote some books that just didn't sell. He was deathly afraid to sell in public, not sell, to speak in public. He sold plenty in public. But I got to meet him, and just real fast. But when I'm telling you the greatest, I mean, when they're with a pool of 250,000 insurance agents, and the number two person across the country selling $52 million worth of insurance, which is a good year. Ben Feldman was selling 153, 155 million. He would triple number two. Now think of that statistically. So we all imagine what he must look like, this power keg of a human being, somewhat like this rocket ship Rob Jolles. People aren't looking at videos of me, are they? And but Ben Feldman stood about 5'3". I got to meet him. He had hair like Larry on the Three Stooges. He spoke with a distinct pronounced lisp. He didn't possess one attribute you'd associate with the stereotypical salesperson. And by the numbers, he sold more than anyone else. So I get to say he may have been the greatest salesperson who ever lived. What that inspires me to remember is that as long as I commit to who I am, what I've got, I may mumble, but I'll mumble better than any other human being. As long as I commit to what I have and not try and be something I'm not, there's nobody who can't sell or present or run a podcast or any of the other things that people think there are barriers to because they don't have the classic, attributes. Not necessary.
Do you know something? That one of the greatest salesmen I came across never sold me anything. I bought from him largely because I thought this guy cares about everything I do. And that was the secret to whatever he did. He never ever tried to sell. He just
Yep.
helped me understand what my need was, and then went, I can help you satisfy that need. Would you like me to help you? And I kept saying, yeah.
Yeah. And Stuart, I know what he did, and I wasn't even there. I'm telling you, he sat back, he created an authentic conversation, and he listened. And he asked questions, probably many of which he already knew the answers, but he let you paint the picture. And by doing that, you walk away going, I don't know, but I really like the guy. Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. But anyway, cheers to him.
Absolutely. Rob, this has been a brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us talking. Listen, if you want to get in, like Alfred, who was watching as we sort of did this live, let me encourage you to just go onto our website. What we do is if you go to this link, which is tca.fyi/subscribe, that's tca.fyi/subscribe, and you put yourself on the newsletter list, we send out an email at the beginning of the week and basically say who's coming up on the podcast this week. So you can join live, you can sort of come in with your comments, you can ask, and you can get here people like Rob giving us brilliant advice that you just can't get. And until such time as you bought his books, which I do encourage you to go and do. But even if you don't buy his books, come and listen to this podcast again. Listen to some of that great advice that Rob's got. And I really appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us.
It was an absolute pleasure. You're my kind of interviewer because what did we do? We had an authentic conversation. We shared a cup of coffee.
We had an authentic conversation. Thank you so much indeed, Rob. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.